Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kommon Nonsense, episode number 2. Today is the 5th of August of 2021. Today's episode, I'm going to be going over Andrew Cuomo and the whole sexual harassment scandal going on with him, in addition to all the COVID stuff that's been happening with him. I'm also going to be talking a little bit about what is going on with these eviction moratoriums and what the CDC is doing with that, and how that's going to potentially affect the housing market moving forward and what we could see with that. Then I'm going to get a little bit into sports. As you guys are going to find out, this is a show where I just like to talk about the stuff that I am interested in. That includes politics. That also includes sports. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the big story in the sports world today. Lionel Messi leaving FC Barcelona, where he might end up going. And then I'm just going to discuss a little bit on the NBA free agency that's been going on. I know a lot of you guys probably aren't fans of the NBA. We can still follow basketball without giving them our money. And I still like to talk sports. I refuse to let the left take that away from me. So we will be going after that afterwards. First, hi, Janine. First, if you guys want to find more stuff from us, from myself, or the other members of the Liberty Revolt media crew, Cole or Dylan, just go check us out over at libertyrevoltmedia.com. We have coming out soon. We'll be having some hats, some shirts, the nice stuff, some nice black hats with some nice writing on them, as well as getting our CBD certified. It is lab tested, lab certified, Liberty Organic CBD. You'll be able to find that over at the shop as well. Thank you guys so much for your support. It's what allows us to come out and put out more content. I love coming and talking to you guys, so whatever helps. But yeah, to get right into it, for those of you who are unaware, New York elected this man named Andrew Cuomo to be their governor, and Andrew Cuomo is a creep. He is a thug. He is a liar. He is that perfect example of the slimy, disgusting politician that got weaseled his way up at the top, and then he got there, and he is just never going to let it go. So this week, it was the New York State Attorney General released their findings, and I think it was a 168-page report that basically confirms Andrew Cuomo loves to grope people. This man has been touching women. He has been touching men. As he puts it, very creepily, he has been touching everyone, young, old, everyone. And this doesn't make it okay. Being indiscriminate about who you're touching does not make the groping somehow okay. This is an absolutely despicable thing to come out, and you know what's going to happen from it is nothing. So let's just line up the timeline here over the last about year and a half. First and foremost, there have been accusations of sexual assault against Andy Cuomo for years now. This is not anything new. They knew this about him going in, but you know what? He is New York. He is a part of the political elite, so that kind of stuff just goes by the wayside. Nobody even pays attention to it. But nobody pays attention to it. They basically sweep it under the rug. And what we're going to be seeing here is that he is being a member of the Democratic elite. Even though you have seen members of the Democratic Party openly turn against him, they're going to openly turn against him now, so that in 5 or 6 months, when he's still there, if somebody ever mentions it again, they can just say, "Oh yeah, I told him to get out of here." You know, similar to what has happened with Ralph Northam, the Virginia governor, who, again, we still don't know if he was in the KKK outfit or the blackface. Normally, when you're talking about the progressive left, any kind of association with any kind of racist anything is enough to get you in trouble. But when you're talking about the Democratic elite, remember, those political positions are much more important than the principle. Okay, this is something we all know. Once you're in that spot, look, man, I'm a politician. I don't get to actually have principles anymore. I got to do what the party says. And you get almost complete immunity for your troubles there. It was, funnily enough, people like Joe Biden said that if this report came out and said that Cuomo was being a giant creepo, that he should resign. To his credit, he reiterated that he thinks Cuomo should resign when questioned about whether or not he should be impeached. a little bit more wishy-washy there. You're going to see a lot of the Democratic establishment come out and either outright ignore it. They'll say that they want, they'll say that they want him to resign or something like that, but no pressure is going to be maintained. Come back to this story in a week or two and see if it's still there. Because remember, the sexual harassment stuff over the last year and a half is not the worst thing he's done. Despite what the left might tell you, where sexual harassment is worse than murder or murder. Um, he also killed tens of thousands of the elderly in the state of New York, and that has seen nothing come of it. And what we've got to do, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm a Kevin. And so as Americans, right, we have to be able to look at our politicians, whether or not these are people we voted for. And obviously, I didn't vote for this guy, and most people didn't vote for this guy. He's in New York. But I just encourage everyone who participates, realize that if you allow people with your party designator next to their name to get away with this kind of stuff, everyone's going to get away with it. You don't get to scream at the other side when your side can't clean its own house. Nothing is going to happen to Cuomo, despite the fact that very obviously this is horrible. I mean, even Bill de Blasio was calling him on it and saying that because Cuomo's defense was just a non-defense. It was absolutely. It reminded me of the Deshaun Watson defense of, but look at how many people look at how many people I touched didn't complain about it, right? And so we have before us this terrible defense where he's saying it's a generational. He was taught by my parents. Now, if that's racism you're being taught, that's not okay. If that's misandry or whatever, that's not okay. But apparently, if it's groping women, that's supposed to be a-okay. My parents taught it to me, therefore I shouldn't. There's no accountability that should be able to be found from that situation. But it is what it is, and what it should be is the end of a political career, and that's on us. It's on us to not let this go. We've already let the Jeffrey Epstein stuff slide. When was the last time anybody talked about Jeffrey Epstein? Let's stop letting them get away with the 24-hour news cycle, right? They're talking about Cuomo, so you're going to start seeing other stories try to take over for that, like various COVID things, lockdowns, everything like that. Don't let them distract you from the reality of not only is Governor Andrew Cuomo, a serial groper who thinks that reaching up under women's shirts, under their blouses, and grabbing their breasts is somehow allowable. Let them know, hey, this is not acceptable to anyone on any level. And what we deserve as the American people is our representatives to actually be somewhat of a reflection of who we are. They're a reflection of ourselves in that they are skeezy slime balls because we don't want to pay enough attention to politics. But you know what? How about for the next couple of years, let's pay a little bit of attention and start getting these guys out of office. But yeah, so the next story, what was I? Oh yes, this eviction moratorium. So for those of you who aren't aware of this issue either, throughout this whole COVID thing, they have been putting protections in place to make sure that people's lives aren't upended by the nonstop COVID madness. This whole they've gone so far as to put eviction moratoriums in, which made sense for maybe a month or two. Actually, I don't think they make sense at all. That's something that should be discussed between a landlord and a tenant. And if they can't reach an agreement and you can't pay, that's, your SOL. Especially since basically 2 months into this whole shutdown thing, it was so clear and evident that there's no way you could possibly think that the lockdown should have continued. But what you've had is this eviction moratorium where people aren't allowed to be evicted, which has led to people not paying rent. You have landlords across the country being completely going bankrupt trying to maintain the properties because their tenants are not being forced to pay rent, and the landlord can't do anything about it. And it's a direct result of a CDC guideline. It's the CDC put the moratorium on these evictions. And if you're asking yourself, like I've asked myself many times, where the hell does the CDC get this level of authority to decide whether or not someone can go through evictions? You're not alone. The CDC is not allowed to be doing this kind of stuff. It's actually been settled by the Supreme Court that what the CDC did in their eviction moratorium is unconstitutional. However, they ruled that it's basically going to carry on until the end because at this point it would cost too much of a disruption to reverse it right now. So we have we have these eviction moratoriums that were supposed to go away. I think this past weekend and got a minor extension. You've seen Joe Biden and others try to say Congress needs to do this, but everyone's going to scapegoat the other. Pelosi tossed it back to the CDC. CDC tossed it back to this legislation. The legislation tossed it over to the president. The president tossed it back over to the CDC. In the end, no one's addressing it because they know this is not tenable. You cannot have laws preventing landlords from collecting rent. I'm sorry, people have to pay for that. Just because you're a lefty and you don't think property rights exist doesn't mean that property rights don't exist and you don't owe that money. That money still needs to be there. But the danger that's going to come from this is going to be seen in the housing market moving forward. We're already seeing a crazy housing market. As far as what during the pandemic, the just absolute skyrocketing of price. But once this eviction moratorium goes away, how is it going to look in what's it going to look like after that? They're going to get rid of this eviction moratorium, and you have tenants owing tens of thousands of dollars in rent that they're not going to be able to pay, even though they've either been receiving unemployment for the longest time, or there have been loans available for this. If you've been one of the people receiving the $16 an hour minimum wage that the government has been paying and you are not paying your rent, I hope you get evicted. I hope you end up on your ass on the streets without a roof over your head, because what you have been committing for the past year is theft on so many levels it hurts. You're stealing from the American people because you've probably been able to work and have decided not to. And then on top of that, you're stealing from people who's put their own money into buying this property. If you don't want to pay rent, go buy property, save up, go through the process, buy property. But if you're going to rent, there's an agreement there that I am paying my landlord the right to have this room. And if I choose not to pay it, I am stealing from them. And if they were to try to evict me and instead the punishment is against them, as it is now, $100,000 fine, that is theft, that is coercion. That is bar none. It is morally wrong. But yet you still see these arguments being made. Well, if they hadn't dug this hole of getting people unending unemployment to the point where, we've been giving these people basically $4,000 a month for the past year, and you're seeing clearly people aren't actually taking care of their responsibilities. They're taking advantage of the system to a scary degree. And it's going to end up with, you're going to see a lot of foreclosures because landlords aren't going to be able to pay for their homes. You're going to see a lot of houses coming onto the market. It's going to be an unfortunate buyer's market again, probably here soon. Right now, we're in a seller's market, but at some point, this eviction moratorium is going to go away, and that debt is going to be called in, as it very well should. I hope that the government doesn't try to step in and pay it, because, at that point, what is the point of having anything if the government's just, what is the point of having any level of accountability if the government's just going to say, here, let me let me fix their mistake for them, which, obviously is the Democratic platform at this point. But I just think the absolute most egregious part of this is that it was the CDC that put in this eviction moratorium, and it is the CDC that they're calling on to extend it. The CDC does not have this kind of power, and the actions you're seeing the executive branch taking, especially since Biden took office, are terrifying, to say the least. They are pushing all boundaries. I forget what it was the other day. I want to say it is this eviction moratorium, but Biden came out and said, I don't have the authority to do it, but I'm going to try to do it. That is incredibly authoritarian. That is out of the playbook. Look, I don't have the power to do it, but I'm still going to try to do it. And in the American system, trying to do it is almost always is just going to allow you to do it. So, it is unfortunate, but at the end of the day, we are this economic conundrum we're barreling towards right now. I'm going to be very interested to see where we end up. Look for the crash in the housing market that's going to come as a result of these never-ending eviction moratoriums. Like I said, you have tenants owing tens of thousands, and it just is not tenable. But It is what it is. All right, I am done talking about politics a little bit for the day. I'll get into it when I get back to basketball. But I like to talk about other stuff. I spend a lot of time talking about politics. So today, for the second half of this show, I'm going to talk a little sports. You know what? Let's talk a little bit politics and sports before I go into this. So there are many of you, especially on the conservative side, that have basically at this point given up watching sports, and I fully understand it. I was incredibly upset watching the bubble last year in the NBA as they had Black Lives Matter all over the court. They had jerseys. You could have your favorite slogans on them. Just no, anti-abortion or pro-gun stuff. Of course, none of the stuff that conservatives would have supported. You have the NFL you have these constant knees being taken during the anthem, all this other stuff, the craziness. We have seen it. We know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't need to explain that part of it. But what I do want to explain is why I am not going to give up my love for sports. Why I am still going to follow these sports, if not try as hard as I can to not financially support them. I do want to avoid financially supporting them as much as possible. But I just refuse to let the left ruin the things that I love. As hard as they will try, I am not going to stop loving sports just because their tendrils have their fingers are so deep into it that every basketball player basically has to barf out an SJW slogan before they answer questions at press conferences. I refuse to let that be taken from me. I love sports. I think that, especially as a young man, sports is one of the greatest outlets possible for being a man. Like the athletic competition, the physical requirements of it, everything about it. I just love sports. I love the camaraderie that comes with it. I love watching sports, watching the achievements, tracking the stats, watching teams, arguing with my friends, playing fantasy football, just um, trying to figure out what's going on with all of that. And at the end of the day, I'm going to continue to follow sports. So if you're not a fan of sports per se, I will give it to you in a non-financially supportive way for them. So you can still follow the sports you love. I'm still going to give you the updates and talk a little bit of analysis. Um, and I really think that there are not that the sports world, the reason why the sports world has gotten to where it's gotten is because there are not enough conservative, libertarian, basically non-woke voices in sports media. And I would like to be one of those voices in sports media that isn't woke, because we need that. The American people deserve to have their Sunday afternoon football games back, their Friday night baseball games back, and I'm going to continue to follow these sports and give you the news. Now, having talked about American sports, let me jump right over to my favorite sport, the European love of soccer. I'm a huge, for those unaware, you can kind of see the banner right above my shoulder over there. You may have seen my shirts that I wear. I'm a massive Manchester United fan. Glory, glory. I have been a Manchester United fan for over a decade now. I've watched every game I could for the last decade, and so I am a true fan, true lover of soccer. Make fun of me all you want, but today the biggest news is that Lionel Messi is going to be leaving FC Barcelona. This comes after a very dramatic saga over basically the last couple of years involving Lionel Messi at Barcelona. During the basically at the start of the 2010s and just before that and just after that, FC Barcelona had one of the greatest teams ever assembled, with an attack spearheaded by Leo Messi, with people like Pedro and David Villa out on the wings. You had Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets in the midfield, Puyol and Piqué rounding out that back line. Amazing team. And the last couple of years, Barcelona has not been able to put a good enough team around Leo Messi. They have tried, in that they have paid outrageous fees for players that make zero sense going into their team, such as Antoine Griezmann and such. And La Liga has been looking at some way to implement financial reform to change it from being a 2 to 3 horse race every single season. Real Madrid, Barca, and Atletico are basically the only teams that are competing every single year. So they implemented some salary cap rules that are coming into effect. And because of these salary cap rules and because of Barcelona's current broken financial situation, they can no longer afford to keep Lionel Messi. So the player that many consider to be, not myself, but many consider to be the greatest player of all time, he is going to be moving. He's going to be going to a new team. The likeliest candidate at the moment is PSG, Paris Saint-Germain. They will be the number one destination, most likely. Neymar is good friends with Leo, even though part of the reason Neymar's at PSG is he wanted to get away from Leo. Now that Messi's kind of in his twilight years, it's more of Neymar's clearly seems to be a little bit more receptive of having him come join the team. So it's going to be very interesting there. Another candidate was Manchester City, who is one of the bigger rivals for Manchester United. They are looking like they could have potentially been in for him. It's going to be interesting to see. They just completed a £100 million, or I think about $135 million transfer for Aston Villa midfielder Jack Grealish. So whether or not they're going to have the financial ability to go out and make that purchase, it's going to be up in the air. I don't think Manchester United is going to go for it as much as we would like someone of Messi's caliber. We have signed Jadon Sancho and Rafa Varane this summer. We plug in that right wing gap that Manchester United's had basically for the last decade. Basically since Ronaldo left. We've been trying to plug our winger, fix our winger worries. So Manchester United probably not going to be going for Leo Messi. We got bigger concerns, mainly that defensive midfield spot. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this changes things because, depending on where he goes, there are players that PSG might have been looking at that now all of a sudden with the presence of Messi, they're not going to pursue. So these players might want different teams. So I'm going to be very interested to see how what kind of effects come from this. But it's just very interesting because, again, Leo Messi has been at Barcelona like his whole life. I don't know, since 9 or 10. I'm not going to look it up. He has been there his whole life. Last summer, it looked like he was going to be on his way out. He had big disagreements with the president, with where the club was going. It seemed like he was forcing his way out to Manchester City. They were getting ready to back up the dump truck full of gold at Barcelona's door to get him over there, and they apparently kind of worked things out a bit. But the financial situation at Barcelona proved to be untenable, and they could not afford him anymore after this year. It was also a pretty disappointing season for Barcelona as far as their club competitions go. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they move forward. Their team is in dire straits. They do not have the financial means to continue on the way they had been for the last 6 years, just paying exorbitant rates for every single player. And when they don't work out, having to sell them for a tenth of the profit. So that's the soccer news. And then the other day, NBA free agency opened up to complete the NBA offseason. Which has been very interesting. I'm a gigantic Lakers fan. Again, I have a sign over there for that one too. I'm a little bit worried about the directions of the Lakers. We were the defending champions going into this year. We made it to the first round of the playoffs and got beat by the eventual champs, the Phoenix Suns. Whether or not we would have lost had our team stayed healthy it's another question entirely. But they have decided to completely, once again, change up the entirety of the team. We won the championship after the bubble last year, basically brought back almost no one, got eliminated in the first round the next year, tried to make the team better, brought in Montrezl Harrell and Dennis Schroeder and stuff like that. Dennis Schroeder. Basically all of that, but it's, team ended up not working out as well. Injuries also really hurt the team this year, which makes sense considering it was a very short break. Basically, season ended like September, October, and started again in December. They had like 2 months off, a month off, maybe. So it's going to be very interesting to see. They decided that They're just going for the oldest team in history right now. Actually, literally, I think they're going to be one of the oldest teams in NBA history. Their average age is over the 32. They brought in Russell Westbrook, which fantastic, absolutely amazing player, especially in the regular season. We're going to see how he does in the playoffs, but you're putting Russell Westbrook, one of the best playmakers in the league, next to LeBron James, one of the best playmakers in the league. So I think a lot of people are looking bad at that. I think that combo might not be the worst possible, especially since they can really offset each other's minutes. And this is a marathon kind of deal, not a race. This is definitely looking at how can we keep LeBron James and Anthony Davis healthy going into the playoffs. That means and still, competing during the regular season. The way you do that is with the Energizer Bunny that is Russell Westbrook. He's probably got like 2 or 3 great years left in him at the most, especially with how much his game relies on his explosiveness and athleticism. So he's trying to get that ring before he goes out. So if he wants to come to the Lakers and they're able to do it, more power to him. I would love to be able to celebrate someone on the team that isn't LeBron James, because as much as I love the Lakers, I agree with you guys know, probably you can assume how I feel about his political stances and his political opinion. So, but it's been interesting. We've had a lot of moves so far in this NBA season. Let me bring up the tracker thus far. It's for those unaware, I use the Reddit NBA subreddit. It's a fantastic compository. Sorry, it's a fantastic compositor of all the information. So the biggest moves, you had Lonzo Ball, who was originally drafted by my Lakers, went to my favorite college team that isn't CSU, UCLA. I was a big fan of Lonzo's coming out of college, but his shot was always a little broken. I thought that he would be a Ricky Rubio type player with maybe more of a scoring threat to him. Ended up being that he is very similar to the Ricky Rubio in that he has really good playmaking, he has really good vision, he's got really good defense, and his shooting is, abysmal, worse than Ricky's. I was a little bit surprised at how much better LaMelo Ball already is than his brother. Another one of the big ones for my Denver fans, we got Will Barton going to the Nuggets. Mike Conley Jr. re-signing with the Utah Jazz on a 3-year, $72.5 million. When he first got to the Jazz, a lot of people actually thought maybe this is Mike Conley on the way out. He didn't look fantastic at the start, but towards the end of as his time with the Jazz grew, he definitely showed how much he could fit in there. He showed that Mike Conley is one of those players that you want leading your team. He's the guy he's tough, he's gritty, and he works his ass off out on the court basically at all times. So he's a great player to have around, not to mention he's just incredibly gifted at basketball. So watching him succeed at Utah is great. If not the Lakers, I would love to watch the Jazz do good this year. What are some of the other big moves? You got the New York Knicks are tooling up to actually not just surprise their way into the playoffs, but maybe even put together a well-organized team. They're targeting more. They're trying to plug some of the gaps that they had last year. You see, they're bringing in Burks. They're bringing in Nerlens Noel to actually give them some kind of defensive presence down low off the bench. So that's going to be. I am interested. I think that the NBA is better off on the whole if the New York Knicks are competitive. The NBA, the NBA needs teams like the Knicks to be competitive. You need teams like the Celtics and the Lakers to be competitive. I think really the Celtics, the Knicks, the Lakers. If those 3 teams are going to be competitive, you're probably going to have a really good NBA season. Those teams really travel. The hatred for them really travels. Everybody hates this. Every away team hates the Celtics and the Lakers. So every time they come to town, it's more it brings more life into it. Every time your teams play in the Celtics or Lakers, it brings more life into it when they're good, especially, you want to beat them. They are the 2 at the top of the NBA hierarchy. So, when the Lakers and Celtics are good, everything's good. But also I think that the Knicks need to be good because for many who play the sport of basketball, Madison Square Garden is seen as the mecca of basketball. When playing in Madison Square Garden is special. You've seen it throughout history. Players, there's just something extra that happens to players when they're in the Garden. You saw it with Michael Jordan. You've seen it with Reggie Miller. You saw it with Kobe Bryant. Like, you have just seen it through history. There's something special about the Garden. So when the Knicks are good and you can go in and there's a hostile Knicks, New York Knickerbockers crowd, things are fantastic. And it's always fun to watch those games, watch your team go into that hostile crowd and just light it up. So right now, the Lakers and the Celtics are competitive, but the NBA really needs that New York Knicks to be competitive because it's been a long time, long decades almost since the Knicks have been worth watching. So it looks like they're putting a semi-solid team together this year, and I would be interested. I think that realistically, somewhere between 4 and 7 is where the Knicks are going to end up. 7 being like if we saw how good they were this year. If somehow the pieces they're bringing in don't fit, which I don't see happening, I could see them finishing around the 7th spot. But I really think that they're building a team that's going to be competing for that 4, 5, 6 spot and is really going to be able to give those top teams at least a run for their money. I don't know if it's going to be they're going to be able to beat a Milwaukee or a Philadelphia. Maybe actually Philadelphia is very much on the table with Ben Simmons being such a flop. But I don't know if you're going to be seeing this Knicks team able to beat a Milwaukee or being able to beat a Brooklyn. But they're going to give them a hell of a time, and which is what you want to see. Another huge move that we have Kyle Lowry going from Toronto to Miami in a sign and trade. He is one of the all-time favorites of the Toronto people as far as the Raptor fans go. He was the leader of that championship team that had featured Kawhi Leonard and OG Anunoby and stuff like that a couple years ago, 2019. He was really the leader of that team, and the sign and trade to Miami just to give him an opportunity to compete. It looks like the Raptors are going to be kind of shutting stuff down and moving on to re-gear and look forward to next year probably. So, it's going to be interesting to watch what Miami does. They had a very disappointing comeback season after last year. They made it to the NBA Finals against the Lakers, where they lost, despite Herculean efforts from players like Jimmy Butler and stuff. But this last year, they kind of just got bonked out right away. Did not look anywhere close to their form of last year, so it was a little disappointing. But yeah, then you have, just to round it out, you have the Lakers we brought in Trevor Ariza, Wayne Ellington, and Dwight Howard. For those of you who don't know who those players are, they are old. They are all old. They are all very old. This team is going to be, yeah, well, get used to it. Like I said, I want to talk about stuff I want to talk about, Dylan. So get used to it. So it's going to be very interesting. It's the geriatric team. We're going to see if they brought in Carmelo Anthony as well. So they're trying to get these guys some rings before they leave the league. But yeah, so it's just a quick rundown of what's going down there. Like I said, half my show is going to be politics and half is going to be whatever the hell I want. If you're not interested in any of that, it doesn't bother me in the slightest. But I like giving my opinion on other things, and I think that we need more conservative voices in it when it comes to the sports world. Once again, don't give them your money if you can avoid it, but also you're allowed to follow and keep up interest so that when they finally start taking those correct steps towards de-wokeifying, we can be sure to reward them again. Because this is what we don't want to have happen is they start actually making the right steps in the direction we want them to go, and there's no reward for them for it. Like we said, we want to incentivize them towards it. So if they start de-wokeifying, I'm going to start paying. I'm going to start, maybe I'll start going to games again. So, yeah, once again, this has been Kommon Nonsense with Kevin. This is the second episode. I appreciate you guys sticking around. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Liberty Revolt channel. Like and share the page. We greatly appreciate it. Come check us out. We have Liberty Organics certified CBD will be available, as well as coming soon we will have some hats and shirts with our Liberty Revolt logo on it. They are the high quality stuff, the high quality shirts, and we are making sure they will not be made in China. They are going to be a slightly more expensive than the cheap shirts, but again, we are doing our best to make sure that China gets no profit at all from our business. So if you want to help support companies that make that a goal of their operations, we're one of them. So thank you again for joining us today, and we will see you again tomorrow.